Saan naman mo diha?
Ulay.
No, put your back.
Relax.
Look what me.
See who's coming. Who's coming?
Oh, my feet are right off. Here. Up here. Up here too. No! Don't go as far as you can. No, get off. Easy. Look, I can go all the way to here. What? Here's the money bird.
Kasi ito i-post ni mo sa kwan. Yung mama
Really?
ni Gitang taga-trail sa Canada.
Ha?
Comment ni mama.
Na?
Ito nga picture.
Kita ang
Sige,
taga-trail
mama. Siya nakita ang taga-trail. Taga-trail nga
Doon
nakita
sa
sa Canada.
sa ferry tato.
Good morning, everyone. We're going to get the 10:40 public tour started. 10:40 public tour.
Hindi siguro no.
Public tour man, oh. Pwede.
That's the royal emblem, sometimes called the Queen symbol. And what makes it unique to British Columbia are the 3 white flowers at the lion's neck. And it's the same flower at the bottom. It's called the Pacific dogwood. BC adopted it in 1956 as our provincial flower. Now in the center is the shield. The lower portion has a setting sun because BC is the westernmost province in Canada. The blue and white wavy lines represent the ocean, and the snowy peaks of the Rocky Mountains are our natural borders. And just above that, the British flag is a nod to our history. Before BC became a province and part of Canada, it was a British colony and part of the British Empire. And before it was one colony, it was 2 separate colonies represented by the animals. Now over here to the left, the stag represents the colony of Vancouver Island, so where you are right now. The colony here was established in 1849, largely due to Sir James Douglas and the statue we saw outside. He was a chief factor for the Hudson's Bay Company, and he came to the island in 1843 to establish the first fur trading post. Now, Fort Victoria was built in the spring of that year, not very far from where you're standing. In the downtown core, there's a prominent street called Fort Street. It's right on Fort Street near Bastion Square that the original fort was built. Sir James Douglas was the second governor of the colony here on Vancouver Island, and he was the first governor of the colony of British Columbia, represented by the ram. This would have been the mainland colony, Vancouver and the interior. It was established a little bit later in 1858. Now the 2 colonies came together in 1866. It was decided to keep the name British Columbia. And then in 1871, 4 years after Canadian Confederation, BC joined the Dominion of Canada and became the 6th province in Canada. Below the shield is our motto, Splendor Sine Occasu. It's a Latin phrase, and it means splendor without diminishment. And it's also the inspiration for what's written on our license plates, beautiful British Columbia. Okay, in the center of the room, allow me to tell you about this canoe on display. This is a traditional Coast Salish river canoe. It was carved by the current Lieutenant Governor of British Columbia, the Honorable Stephen L. Point. By the way, lieutenant can also be pronounced lieutenant. It's the same word. Up here in Canada, we pronounce lieutenant lieutenant. His Honor found the log right here in Victoria on a beach near Ross Bay, and he enlisted the help of a master carver, and when they finished, he We are all in the same boat together, and we must all paddle together to go forwards. I'll explain in more detail the role of the Lieutenant Governor and what they do in the province upstairs. Now, if anyone would like to use the elevator, it's located through this archway to the left, and everyone else, you can follow me up the stairs to the second floor.
Myself into designing these buildings as a perfect, permanent tribute to the turn of the 20th century, and to see them diminished in that way. Well, indeed, in any way, it was heartbreaking. Now, perhaps I'd better introduce myself. Francis Mawson Rattenbury, BC architect. At your service. Pleasure to meet you.
Me too.
Now, you may be surprised to know that I have partially forgiven those responsible for the functional changes made to certain sections of my building. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, you heard me correctly. I said forgive, but in part. You see, I can, of course, completely understand the bureaucratic push towards functionality, but what I cannot forgive is ugliness. You see, my friends, I am a designer, an artist, a master of form. But, well, I suppose I am also an architect, a builder, a servant of function. Either way, as I first envisioned these beautiful spaces, I tried to imagine the emotional response I wished to elicit from each visit, each worker and each servant of government who would eventually come to move about the place. See, I carefully considered the experience of being here, and what it must mean to each person who was. Now that is its form, its artistry, but I did not wish to overwhelm. Well, that would suit its function, but what good would come from... What good would come from overwhelming the observer to the point where they were so affected by the experience that they could not recall their reason for being here in the first place. Which is why the building is shaped as it is. You see, functionally it has been planned from the ground up for efficiency of movement and for the rapid and successful progress of one's daily business. Now, its basic silhouette is that of a cross, you see. Each arm of the cross houses an assortment of government offices. In the centre of the cross houses the seat of our government, where we practice the intrinsic rights of civilization, where we pass laws, initiate debates, and celebrate the strengths and delicacies of democracy. It is the very heart of our legislative body. Now, for all of this impressive form, it would seem I made one crucial error. I was too rigid, you see, too fundamental. I did not adequately consider a need for expansion. But British Columbia would grow, yes? Yes, of course it would. It continues to do so both socially and economically. This province's potential is limitless. But I made its governing spaces finite, with limits on the thing to do. Now, I will admit it was a beginner's mistake. I was only 25 years old. Designs were accepted by the powers that be, not bad. So, I must forgive those poor mid-20th century renovators who will be forced to twist these most agreeable spaces into, well, rather unsightly administrative areas. Where I had meant to provide expansiveness of emotion, I instead provided restriction of opportunity. So, yes, I must forgive them for making these buildings more functional. But, what I cannot forgive is the tedious manner in which they went about it. Cubicles. Linoleum on the floor. Oh! Well, how can anyone be inspired to the proper level of public service by being forced to work all day long in a tiny plastic box? Oh! Oh, Rachel. Oh, it's dreadful.
That's terrible.
Now, I must also allow some forgiveness for the fact that, well, Canada is such a very young nation. Yeah. Well, I suppose you're not all that bad. You know, it funny though? It always seems to be a forward-thinking person who recognizes the value of looking to the past. You see, in my case, one of my greatest champions will be a newspaper man named James K. Nesbitt. And in 1961, Mr. Nesbitt's mighty pen will write about the importance of preserving these very buildings, of restoring them to their original and valuable splendor. And how I would prove. Oh, how I do prove. I am glad that when you all visit these buildings so long after I'm gone, they will resonate with the attitude that I originally infused them. So there you have it, friends. My Parliament buildings, they...
Really?
Our Parliament buildings. They continue to live an interesting life. And that has always been of vital importance to me, to live an interesting life. And as some of you may already know, my life took an interesting turn of its own. Rather interesting indeed, eh, Rachel?
One word.
It's scandalous, some might say. Well, should we meet again? I'm certain we will. I promise to tell you all about it. But for now, my friends, I'll let you finish up with Rachel. Thank you very much.
Very well. So coming back to the present then, I'll tell you a little bit about how British Columbia's government is set up. The province is divided into 85 electoral districts, and so we have 85 elected representatives in our provincial government. Their title is Member of the Legislative Assembly, and for short we call them MLAs. Now over to the left side, that's where the governing party sits, which is the BC Liberals. And it's the leader of the governing party who becomes